Hi everyone. My name is Eric De La Fuente, and I'm the Vice President of Sales and Partnerships here at Nihilus. I'm joined by my colleague Avichai, also known as Kai, who runs the sales team over in the EMEA region. So, as Avi mentioned, we're going to talk a lot about what we learned from the two conferences we attended over the last couple of weeks. Hopefully, it'll be a fun, engaging conversation for y'all, and Avichai and I will be going back and forth a little bit, talking about each other's learning. So, as I mentioned, over the last few weeks, our team was on the ground at Money 2020 and AFP 2025. We met with hundreds of finance and treasury leaders. We attended sessions. We gathered insights on where the industry is heading in today. As I mentioned, we're going to share some of those top takeaways we heard across those conversations and how Nihilus is helping teams act on them. So across both events, the sentiment was pretty consistent, at least from my perspective. Finance leaders are seemingly running way too many systems with way too little clarity. There are bank portals, ERPs, spreadsheets that never quite align, and manual work needs to be kept. Manual work is needed to keep everything in order and running smoothly, and that manual work is starting to become a breaking point. Lots of teams I spoke with told us that they spent thousands of hours reconciling data, producing forecasts, frankly, that no one really fully trusts, which causes a lot of challenges downstream, especially for teams that are trying to be more agile and proactive. And then amid these rising rates, idle cash is now becoming a silent drain with millions lost each year through inflation erosion and missed opportunities. And lastly, I heard repeatedly that month-end and audits have become times that not only erode credibility for the treasury team, but stress those teams further and strain an already fleeting team capacity. So those are some of the biggest takeaways that I heard. Avichai, I'm not sure there was anything in particular that you heard repeatedly that you wanted to address now.
So, of course, we had a lot of similar. I think the main thing that the team came back with each time as the common recurring feedback was how, regardless of working, in Excel sheets or in other, portals or whatever the system might be that teams are navigating in, for the most part, it's as you mentioned, things are broken and fragmented, and that siloing of data leads to, of course, missed opportunities around constantly not finding where your cash needs to be at any point in time, and separately always being reactive in the way that you're managing your cash, which of course is a common result that we see as a result of manual work. So I really do agree with that second point that you've said there. And I think it's something that we're seeing a lot in the space.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of those in a little bit more detail. And I mean, we spoke with organizations that were massive in scale, right? Multi-billion-dollar organizations and a lot of smaller ones too. But one of the consistent themes through those conversations was that once organizations kind of cross that $100 million in revenue threshold, complexity seems to just explode, right? It just starts to get really intense for a lot of teams. There's new entities, sometimes new currencies, lots of bank accounts, and all of these things start to multiply faster and faster than controls and processes seemingly can keep up. I heard from a lot of teams that were frankly trying to stay lean while juggling forecasting and funding and FX. They're doing all of that still manually and oftentimes in Excel or in Google Sheets. And so because of that, these treasury functions are becoming, as you mentioned, Avichai, reactive instead of strategic. They're not getting out in front of some of these challenges.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's actually just as you're jumping to that slide, one of the things that we're learning a lot about the companies who are, say, at that entrance to the mid-market stage, where they're at that give or take 100 million in revenue, is that if they if they're already adopting those habits of keeping their data in multiple places as they're building on these new entities and as they're building on these new accounts, one of the things I heard a couple of times at AFP on the floor were people saying they feel like they made the mistake at the beginning. They feel like they didn't quite understand how to consolidate their data from the start. And what that meant is every time they actually grew in a direction that meant consolidation would later become even more difficult. So this is actually a really sensitive point here that kind of goes back to the theme of how do you start and how do you first plan about your cash? And I'm sure that this could relate to plenty of people either listening now or, of course, those that we spoke with, of course, on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Again, it's just like that planning and getting ahead of some of these things before they happen, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I- Another thing that I think we both heard often, I remember talking about this with the team internally afterwards, um, is we're kind of operating, finance teams and treasury teams are kind of operating, I'm going to keep using this term because it's so prevalent, but reactively. They're just using yesterday's numbers. They're not necessarily looking forward and looking at kind of what's coming and how they can steer the business from there. Um, and this is because, everything is just scattered across dozens of portals, spreadsheets, and miscellaneous areas that folks are storing things. And by the time that those reports kind of really reach the decision makers, they're outdated, right? They're no longer relevant. The takeaway here, I think, is that Treasury has data everywhere and answers, frankly, nowhere. I'm curious, Avikai, outside of spreadsheets, I heard a couple of interesting places people were storing files and things like that. But did you hear anything interesting on the floor?
So I actually had a wild story, which was a company who they're a B2C company in terms of their industry, and they log into something around 25 banks and portals each day, and a number of those, around 15 of them, are PSPs, so payment gateways. One of the things that they mention happens, and this is a really frustrating thing to look back on retroactively, is that oftentimes the PSPs that they're using less, they start to check on more, less and less frequently. So at a point in time, they were checking their banks daily, and as they grew to a certain scale, they didn't have the capacity to do the same thing at the same cadence, meaning they started to check bank balances, for example, weekly. Now, that meant for some of their PSPs, the ones that they weren't monitoring as often as they should be, they actually ended up finding money just lying there, otherwise not being acted upon, not being used correctly at all. And it was revenue that they didn't even manage correctly at all. So something that we see for these companies that are growing and growing quickly is that often money gets left behind. And that was a really interesting thing to hear about as well at the conference.
Yeah. Yeah. And another topic I think that a lot of folks were bringing up was around forecasting, right? I think most of the
I think this is
sessions,
the big one.
yeah, I feel like most of the sessions, or at least the folks that I talked with coming out of the sessions, I try to ask about their goals, right? Like what are they trying to accomplish at the conference? What's the thing that they want to, leave the conference with? And more and more, I would just hear forecasting, something around forecasting. It was either too manual, they wanted to do it better, they wanted to have it more accurate, whatever it was always forecasting. Um, Most of the teams we spoke with, I think we found, are still building these forecasts in spreadsheets, even if they're on a full suite TMS, like one of the legacy players that are out there, but it's not really working. And for us, that spent a lot of time in this area, I think it's struggling because we know what those inaccuracies lead to. Things like surprise shortfalls, over borrowing, eroded trusts with other folks in the organization. I had one CFO tell me that he spends, or his team probably spends more time explaining those misses than preventing them. And so I think just thinking about inaccuracy in the context of forecasting, it's becoming an extremely expensive inefficiency for treasury teams and in finance.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with you. And it's how you mentioned forecasting is something that every member of the team is either influencing or being influenced by. So if the team aren't able to pull together the forecasts in the best way possible, whether it be because data, as I mentioned before, is siloed, or the result of that for those in leadership, CFOs, VP finances, and of course the heads of the treasury teams who are making those decisions around cash, they often find that if the data isn't in the right places, then executing on that data becomes so much more difficult. And it takes us back to that point that we've mentioned a few times now, but it's being again reactive to your cash. So you end up borrowing incorrectly or putting on a credit line or separately finding some other issue around not being able to, for example, invest your cash. And that all, stems from the beginning. It's about making sure that your forecasting is being done correctly and at the right cadence.
Yeah, it's a good segue. You were talking about investing cash, and we did hear a lot about having idle cash and not really being able to do anything with it because they're dealing with so much complexity in reacting to the demands of the business. This really became kind of the forgotten inefficiency. I say forgotten in the sense of like the organization forgets about it. The treasurer knows it's there and they're trying to figure out what to do with it, but ultimately it's tough to mobilize around. And it's because there's just a lot of, or rather poor visibility that sometimes leaves millions or billions sitting in these accounts while nothing but debt costs are just continuing to rise. And these leaders that we spoke with are describing liquidity more as a safety net that's kind of becoming a drag on enterprise value and not getting ahead of these things. And we've said this term probably 1,000 times already, Avikai, but not just at AFP, but the proactivity around things like idle cash. I'm curious, anything specific that you can pull from your conversations from the floor?
I mean, it's quite nice that you ask because it gives us somewhat of a full circle in what we've spoken about so far. If we look at the way that we've kind of been navigating this conversation, it's about how the more you grow, it's the more you wish you could turn back the clock and start to find a way to make sure that your data was in the right place at the right time to act on it in the proactive way that you describe. And I had heard about somebody who was saying that if his data was in the right place, he could have made the decisions at, say, for example, mid-month rather than end of month. People find that to grow quickly, they want to be investing, but their opportunity to invest only comes about when they get that final report at the very end of the month when they're looking to close or when they're looking to, make those decisions. But if you want to get there quicker and if you want to make the best decisions around your cash, you also want to be able to find that idle cash, say, right after you've brought in certain collections mid-month or a third of the way through the month and make those decisions in real time. And I think that's something that as we're hearing more and more, we heard it both in the conferences and I hear it often and we hear it from our customers too. It's something that becomes more and more exciting as a point to work around.
Yeah, and that's another good transition into what it is that we're trying to do at Nihilist, right? We ask teams, um, what they're doing to address a lot of these challenges that we've brought up so far, and a lot of them said, they've got some type of TMS platform, and they really like them. I mean, a lot of these are good systems of record, but to your point, Avikai, like the decisions aren't being made fast enough, and not only the decisions, but nothing's happening after the decision is made, or at least not timely enough. So
Right.
these systems that these folks are using they might be great at storing data and showing reports, but they're not enabling or taking that action on behalf of the treasury function. These forecasts are still disconnected from live bank data and they remain static. CFOs can see what happened, but not what's coming next. And that's frankly, I think, where we come in, right? Where Nihilist comes in. We're trying to add an agentic layer that forecasts, decides, and acts in real time, as you mentioned.
Yep. And as you're swinging it towards Nilis's direction, I think what's quite unique, and I heard this quite a few times on the floor around AFP, but I hear it otherwise in general in the space, is that people who work in, say, legacy systems, one, leverage Excel all the time, and that's something that we discussed earlier. On top of that, they often, and I heard this a couple of times, may have like their own AI piece that they're moving their data to and further breaking it down so it becomes even more fragmented to put it into some AI something, a chat GPT or whatever it might be, to ask a question that of course is bringing in data from who knows where and all these other ports. But then it brings it back to Nihilus saying, what if you could make sure that the action was coming in from the same place that's storing your record? And this is what's quite nice about us as a system is making sure that yes, we provide the record of data and aggregate all of that to one place. But then it's also about building on top of that and helping you do the things that we were discussing before, whether it be finding that idle cash or achieving your free cash flow targets or whatever it might be. That's where the actioning of the cash comes in quite nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned AI because that was really like the buzzword, right? I think almost every session had, at least that I saw, had something around AI. If it wasn't some type of regulatory thing, it was something around AI. And those are the toughest sessions, I think, to get into. I know our conference stage when we were talking with Stack Adapt and with Tracy Knight from Real Treasury, we talked a lot about AI as well. But I feel like, and you mentioned a handful of ways that folks are thinking about using AI, but I feel like, at least from the conversations I was having, it wasn't really about how to use AI to do things or how to maximize the value of AI. It was more some trepidation around AI in general. Like we're already going in that direction. It's just what's defendable? Like it was more of a conversation around trust, it seemed like. I heard from multiple CFOs, I say CFOs, they're probably VPs, but multiple finance leaders, something along the lines of, we can't take AI says so to the board, right? They just can't do that. There has to be something more behind that. And I think Nihilist really aims to solve that, right? We deliver assurance grade AI that's explainable, auditable, and compliant with standards like NIST AI RMF and ISO 42001. For us, we call it, AI that you can govern and defend. And so we're trying to enable the treasury function by through the use of AI. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, so there's a really interesting couple of points here. I think nobody can avoid the fact that AI is present, and more than present, it's actually taking over in so many different ways, whether it be, running the way that we, build on certain tasks or helping us make certain decisions. AI is now central to every part of everyone's space, meaning if you don't have AI, you're falling behind. And I think what's really quite useful is knowing that those who aren't necessarily putting forward the building of certain reports, forecasts, or whatever workflows the treasury team would need to be building, but the leadership of a team, so the CFO or the VP finance, or maybe the VP of treasury who's executing certain cash-based movements, can then leverage AI for that decision-making process. So AI can be used really for two things here in the best ways possible. One, like you mentioned, to enrich the workflows that you're generating. And on top of that, to provide that governable and audit ready AI response to a certain part of your workflow, saying, here's the way we can actually go and action that.
Yeah.
It's two ways
Yeah.
that AI is valid.
Yeah, for sure. And I think after hearing so much about all of these challenges, right, it's clear that the industry is seemingly trying to move away from this passive reporting, this kind of reactive stuff to proactive action. And as we were talking about, that's what Nihilus enables. I just on the slide here, Avikai, it's a summary of some of the main items that we heard, and frankly, from our perspective, how Nihilus can address them. We talk about scattered visibility to auto aggregation, and then fixing FX windows with suboptimal borrowing to an FX agent that acts on market signals, not just spreadsheets. So right now, I think feel like we're trying to build all of these agents that can help with kind of different components of the treasury workflow, and it doesn't necessarily need to be specific and precise to, or it can be specific and precise to a category within the treasury function. It doesn't need to be the full suite, and that's where I think what we're trying to evangelize, or at least we were at AFP, which is a lot of this AI functionality can layer on top of existing infrastructure, right? We can put it on top of a legacy TMS if an organization is already using it, but wants to tap into AI and feels that whatever they're using is dragging behind. You see some of these things on the screen here, Abdikai. Curious to get your thoughts.
Everybody talks about different types of AI agents, but I think putting away the different names for each of these agents and what they can go and do, knowing as we mentioned before that AI can sit either as its own system like Nihilus or on top of something else. This is again echoing things we heard so often at AFP. People want to see a way that they can incorporate these different agents into their workflows. So whether it be to consolidate information or to improve the information itself, and then, of course, as mentioned before, to execute, for example, liquidity-based decisions or FX-based decisions based off of that, then of course, this is what leaders really want to see. And I think that's what's exciting about one, the space, and two, what people are eager for in today's world.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna run through kind of high level what we're building at Nihilus, and then I'll transition over to you, Avikai, for the demo of the product. So let me get through the next couple. But as we were talking, I mean, for the audience, you guys will see this in more detail momentarily. But as I mentioned, we're trying to build co-pilots that surface insights and provide recommendations based on these learned behaviors proactively. I won't play this video as Avikai will show you guys in more detail here in a second. Um, but in our platform, the intention is to unify all of the bank, ERP, and PSP data into one intelligence layer, delivering that real-time cash visibility, forecasting, reconciliation, and liquidity optimization. Then specialized AI agents will act as your full stack treasury team, where visibility or for visibility, liquidity, FX, anomaly detection, those types of things. Together, these agents will learn continuously, and the intention is to turn that insight into action. And because of this unique approach, the time to value that we can provide is exponentially shorter. I mean, gone are the days of the 6 to 12 month implementations. We have one AI native model, not bound by rules, taking action and not just reporting at a lower cost than legacy systems, live in as little as 30 days. I mean, that's Nihilus. And when we compared notes with treasury leaders, and I think I got ahead of myself there in a second. When we compared notes with treasury leaders, this graphic that I'm showing you here, it could have come straight from the stories of what they want. Today's status quo means 10 logins, fragile forecasts, and idle balances, as we've mentioned today. And Nihilus replaces all of that with intelligent agents that automate visibility, improve forecasting, accuracy, and proactively reallocate things like cash. This is what life after Nihilus looks like. It's faster, smarter, more confident decision making. And so,
If I can just quickly add on to that,
sure.
the most exciting thing I think about everything, most people see treasury as two things. One, a kind of a cost center, and I think we've discussed about what it can mean when it becomes a profit center, and we can focus more on that point afterwards. But the other thing that I think is amazing about an architecture like this is that you really get that quick time to value. So many people are used to understanding treasury to be if I implement a system, I won't see value until 18 months afterwards, or at least, 12 plus. But if we could provide you something much quicker, meaning you don't need to have an onboarded team in some, with some, foreign to the organization consultancy team who's helping you navigate that, but rather you can have people genuinely understand the way that you're working and you can run a plug and play implementation on a system, then you're getting that quick time to value and with turn, of course, much more value.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the vision that we heard from a lot of the practitioners was can be summarized as this: like, I need answers, not just reports. What we're trying to do at Nihilus is bring that to life with an augmented treasury analyst, your quote unquote on-demand co-pilot that delivers insights before you ask. And across both events, I think, Avikai, one thing was clear, right? The future is going to belong to those systems that act and don't just give records or reports. These legacy tools that are out there, in our minds, were built for the past. They're fragmented, they're rigid, they're reactive. And Nihilus is built for what's next. It's unified, it's learning, it's autonomous. It's a system of action designed to coexist with your current stack, deliver value in weeks, as you mentioned, Avikai, and scale as you grow. That's the future Treasury letters told us they're ready for. Um, but anyways, now that we've kind of talked a lot about how the events at AFP and Money 2020 align with our vision, I want to bring it to life a little bit. And so in the next segment, Avikai, I'm going to have you walk us through a live demo of Nihilus. And for the audience, we're going to show how the platform connects your data, your forecasts, cash with precision, how we can forecast cash with precision, and really empower treasury teams to move from, again, that reactive to strategic motion in real time. So, Avikai, I'll hand it over to you and let's take a look.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to share my screen. Eric, I guess you can just quickly let me know if you're seeing what I'm presenting.
Yep,
You
we
should
got it.
see now. Fantastic. So what we're looking at now is Nihilus AI. Now, this really is the start and endpoint of the system. Now, of course, being an AI first TMS, what Nihilus manages to achieve time and time again is the ability, as mentioned before, to aggregate cash, consolidate those workflows, and generate them automatically. But the really exciting thing is that you can come in at any point in time, ask specific questions in a chat GPT like where you've got your chat saved on the side, and of course you can come in and ask any question at any point in time. So leveraging one of these prompts that I've got here below, I'm going to ask the question on the first one there. Now it says, I want to describe my cash flow trends in the last 3 months. What the system does, and it's really quite cool here, is it's analyzing my bank data, my transactions that have been tagged and categorized, and it's building out the 3 reports of the last few months that we've got measured here in this demo environment, allowing us to see category by category here in quite a macro breakdown of exactly what my cash flow report would look like. Separately to that, it's providing an analysis below. So the analysis helps me understand that, for example, here, September had a major increase in inflows, and there was my net cash flow dipped on a separate month, and it helps me to really understand how I'm navigating my cash. I can come in, of course, at any point in time, ask further questions, maybe track analysis, see what drivers I have in my cash at any specific point in time, and that way I can get a really nice either holistic or drill down question and answer review on my cash at any specific point. Now, what you're probably wondering is what is this built out of? So, in fact, just before diving into the modules themselves, what we're going to look at today is our treasury module, which basically is made up of both the cash positions and forecasting pieces. Separately, we have ERP reconciliation, which allows you to push data back to your ERP. That can be for the sake of certain cash accounting moves. That could be, of course, to provide automated cash application, to get your bank feed uploads to your ERP, separate things. And of course, payment gateways allows you to also track your PSPs for our B2C clientele who can track payments to PSP transfers to their banks and their ERPs for a full reconciliation there. But looking back here, of course, you can connect all of your data sources to one system and first and foremost, get your cash balances in one place. So what we're looking at here is a snapshot of how much cash I have in any specific region, filtered here down by banks, subsidiaries, currencies, of course, passed over that one, but my labels of cash and my types of cash as well, where I can get a much quicker and simpler breakdown of that cash. In this instance, done by bank, specifically seen here by account, with the type of that account, the subsidiary that it's related to, the label that shows me a way of tagging that cash, specifically how I'd like to do it, whether it be, for example, restricted or unrestricted cash. Use cases give different, give different titles to those specifically. And then I can see my original balance versus my converted balance if I have foreign currencies. What the system does that's very unique as well is it makes sure that it's pulling in the data all the time and can guarantee for you that the balance is validated as well for your own internal checks. You can assess trends over time and follow your investments as well. But moving on to the transactions, this page here that's just loading up now is basically the main data log of what builds up your cash flow reports. One of the things that we see here is, of course, transactions with a purple highlight and those with a black highlight. What we're seeing here is basically either transactions that have come to the system for the first time, where Nihilus uses AI to understand from this specific, we'll take maybe something with a bit more complexity, this specific transaction with quite a long detail in the description of the transaction, and AI can take from that the counterparty, basically the customer or the vendor in your ERP, and associate it directly to, in this instance, a vendor. According to that, it provides a suggestion of the vendor that it thinks it's related to and will categorize it accordingly. The system will, of course, do this one time in purple, and then from there on in black, as seeing here, a transaction that's popped up multiple times in a row, it can tag and categorize it automatically. That means that your main data log will be just to break down a few uncategorized transactions. And most of our customers today find, give or take, 1% of their transactions, ultimately the new ones to the system, to be those that they are categorizing manually, which they do, of course, one time, and from there on becomes an automated process. The same thing for those who are multi-geo and multi-entity will experience the and benefit from the matching of their intercompany and internal transfers. And what that means here is basically once all transactions are tagged and categorized, we can basically take them, present you with nice, neat dashboards that show you your inflows versus your outflows and your categories for tracking, and then provide you with your cash flow report here. All of my breakdowns are seen below in their separate categories. I can, of course, monitor my reporting settings to test operating cash versus other forms of investing or financing cash, and can separately filter on these boards. What I'm seeing here and linking it back to Nihilus AI is that at any point in time, I can assess how that cash was built up, how I got to those specific reports that were built out, and of course, then I can go and prompt the system to ask me for more. Eric, now just before I jump into the forecasting module, turning it back to you, what are the main ways that you see some of our either customers or people who are asking you when looking into Nihilus, how they benefit the most from Nihilus AI?
Yeah, I think you glossed over the insights over on the top left, which is one of the things that a lot of the customers we talk about, or I talk to me about. It's those proactive recommendations. If you want to flip that open, these alerts and the insights, right? A lot of organizations that I end up speaking with from our customer base love this because you can kind of customize these alerts to any type of agreements or other context really that you have within the platform, whether those are vendor agreements, debt covenants, that type of thing. And so you'll see things here like financial exposures, insufficient funds, excess balances. Great from a reporting perspective or an alerting perspective. You click over to Insights, Avichai. This is the feature I think that a lot of folks really like, which is getting ahead, getting proactive on the things like we were talking about earlier. Example is the excess cash available, right? Making recommendations on where this organization should be investing or exploring their options. So those are two of the main ways that I see a lot of folks using the platform. And then from the AI perspective, it's just having that dialogue. You were talking about the ability to drill down into different categories and different things in the details. Um, and to do that today, right? If I'm a treasurer, I have to ping my analyst or go into the spreadsheets myself and kind of figure out what someone else was building. And with an AI platform like Nihilus, our customers are having that conversation and even cross collaborating with accounting and finance where they're not bugging the treasury team. They're just logging into the system and asking those questions themselves. So those are some of the ways. I hope I answered your question.
You definitely did. I think one last point to add on to that that's so unique, and it goes back to what you were talking about before in that slide deck, was about making sure that the AI is always something that you can trust. Now you can see here in these pointers that you can always reference to the forecast, which we'll come onto in a moment, or the expected items, which we'll come onto in a second as well, that make sure that all of the points that we're looking at, and if we look at the alerts, you'll see those notifications as well. All of those alerts are also backed up. So if I'm looking to understand why the system has prompted me to go and, for example, invest extra €500,000 that I might have here, or at least do something with it, then I can say, what am I seeing in my cash flow and what am I to see in my forecast? And how is that going to basically validate the prompts that I'm getting from the system? But jumping to the forecasting module itself, one of the really cool things that we're going to do that other systems surprisingly aren't able to do is also connect to your ERP. It's quite a basic, but very necessary to basically bring on your invoices, your bills, POs, SOs, and effectively any future transaction, or what we call a projected flow that could come to the system. Now, if you have a series of different ERPs, you lack an ERP, or your data is being brought in from CSV, we can, of course, upload that as well. Or separately, you can create extra transactions directly in the system, which will allow you to build out a really granular forecast. AI comes in again here in quite a fantastic way. It allows you to understand your due dates per scene in your ERP and also perform a analysis, in this example, on Orion Mobility, a specific invoice that's coming from the system, where AI will basically say, right, we're connected to your actuals. We also see this data coming in from your ERP. And now we can say, when is the customer most likely to actually pay me? So here we're getting a pointer from AI who comes and says, typically this specific counterparty, Orion Mobility, pays 3 days late based on the last 6 months of data. And you can see the latest invoices to check that as well. They've recommended that we push off this collection to the 15th of the month, which means when I get to my forecast, I, of course, one, have updated data per my ERP, and secondly, have used AI to relate back to my actuals and say, what genuinely does happen? What am I really seeing? And according to that, build something that really represents reality. What I have overall here is a forecast that shows me my past and present periods with actuals showing me back to my cash flow screen and of course the forecast itself. Next to that, I have the attainment level. So how well am I performing in order to get to that specific cash goal? What is the area that I might need to focus on? And when I get to that breakdown, I of course can see the specific categories that are building up those elements of my forecast. Separately in the forecast, I can do things like add notes, so communicate as a whole system. If I'd like to go to that edit version, what it means is that I have an Excel feel like within my system. I can go, for example, to this collection screen and add in a figure manually. Now, on top of that, if I add in that figure manually for the sake of being audit ready, if I want to make sure my team understands what I've gone and done, I can then note here that I've added a certain sum, whatever that might be. I could save it and leave it there as a note, or separately, I might want to go and tag a specific person, for example, Eric, and say something, la di da, in this instance. What that will do is it will basically assign a task to Eric, right? Which if I hop over to tasks management, it will basically allow me to work directly with Eric in the system. So what I'll see here is, and of course I didn't save that specific one, so we'll look at one other on by random. And you can see here that a task has been assigned to somebody with, in this case, a medium priority level. And it says to tag a certain transaction. It's been assigned by someone who would have been me to Eric with a description, the ability to then build out a thread or link items to the same thing. So, Eric, going back to the thing that you mentioned before, multiple teams can actually gain benefit from the system. And that's something that's really quite special as well. Now, ending it off, if I head back to that final view setting that we saw there, I can build out within the system multiple scenarios as I go. I can build them out really quite simply. I can separately develop my forecast over different periods of time, monitor subsidiaries or different currencies as I need, and of course, going back to that insights column, look at the insights themselves as well, based on the forecast that I now have presented in front of me. So this is a really cool way that AI comes to, at this point in time, do a few things. One, with everything we've looked at in reporting, I can ask questions to the system, I can understand my cash going backwards, and of course, relate it to what I'm seeing currently. I can also gain those insights on my past data measured against my current positions. Going to the forecast, I can, of course, also gain those insights as to how to manage my cash going forward. But what we've developed, and this is really quite special in the market, is how can we then use Nullus AI, and I'll link it back to finish off with this. How can we then use Nullus AI to do things like not just action my cash according to what I'm seeing in my forecast, but what if I want to go and make certain executions around, for example, finding idle cash? Or what if I want to go and achieve my free cash flow target? Companies have KPIs and things that they're looking to achieve to do, and I'm sure everybody in the audience is thinking about something that they at the moment that they want to achieve within their organization. And Nice AI can help you go to achieve that. So to round it off, I'm going to click here, for example, on the Locate Idle Cash tab. And of course, you can see that Nihilus is providing a whole stream of data on my accounts specifically here. Just for the interest of time and in the interest of course, not reading the whole page to you, what I'm seeing here on the top example is it says here a certain entity, the balance closed at $15 million yesterday, which is above the recommended range. There's an opportunity to move a certain amount, in this instance, $5 million, to my US bank investment account, potentially earning a certain yield and a certain amount of money. Now, I'm seeing that based off of the things that we've designed together in your cash policy that we build out when working together with your organization. The system then asks, would you like to drill down into a specific entity? I'm going to say yes, please. I'm always saying polite to my chats here, and I'm saying yes, please, the US one. Now, what the system's immediately doing is it's analyzing further into that specific US entity, pulling out a series of transactions, in this instance here, that have led to that spike, right? That we can see getting to that 15 million and showing you what those transactions were. What it means to say is here, there is a certain amount of cash that is increased, and now I can go and find how much to go and invest. So it asks me if I'd like to review that. I'm going to say yes. And now what the system is doing is it's providing me multiple ways per our cash policy of us to go and invest cash. It's showing me what's coming up, whether it be my AR or my AP, to understand, is that cash genuinely available and can I actually treat it as idle cash? And of course, once I've done the whole process here and I've picked an investment plan, I can go and prepare that transfer request. So I'll do that as well. And now the system is running that transfer request directly here. All I need to do is download it, ship it off to the bank or my other investment platform, and from that point on, go and do it. So to summarize everything we've seen here, of course, from your positions to your reports and your forecasts, Nihilus is aggregating data. And of course, like every other talented system, it's providing a system of record, allowing me to understand where my cash is. On top of that, it's taking from records to action by generating enriched workflows that really understand the nature of my business and the way that I need to work today. And on top of that, it's allowing me to execute cash decisions that are strategic and aligning with the cash policy that we build out together to make sure that cash can be proactive and treasury can remain eventually a profit center instead of a cost one. But Eric, I've just closed off my share screen there. So back to you, and I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Avikai. Thank you for walking us through that. There were a couple of questions in the chat as we were presenting, so I'm going to read those off in case everyone can't see the answers to those. But as I do this, if there are other questions that come up based on what we talked about earlier or the demo itself, feel free to put them in the chat here. Someone asked if the slides will be shared with attendees, and yes, a recording of this session will be sent out to all who attended. I think all who registered. Somebody asked about automated KPIs and financial analysis. I think this was at the beginning of the demonstration when we were talking about those items. And so I mentioned we were about to see what kind of KPIs we were referring to, which was at the very beginning of the demonstration when Avichai was interacting with Nihilus AI. And I mentioned that was the reporting agent, which allows for ad hoc reporting and analysis. Somebody else asked how much participation is needed to build the LLC, and is it different for each client? I assume this person was referring to the LLM, and if that's what they meant, then there really isn't anything specific you'd need to do for the agents themselves. Once we connect to your banks, your ERPs, your other systems, we feed Nihilus any other context like agreements, debt covenants, etc., then we're ready to go because the model's trained, the model's ready. We just need to give it the data to access in order to provide the responses that you guys were seeing. I did
And
see.
just if I can double click on that point. So the beauty of these LLMs is that, of course, constantly learning, they're constantly developing. So the more data you feed it and the more time, of course, that you give it, it always will provide you with the response, but the response basically only gets better and more tailored to your business case. So that's the beauty here of AI in this specific instance.
Yeah, thanks. Hi. Um, well, it looks like those are the only questions in the chat. So appreciate everyone's time. Thank you all for joining us for this recap of Money 2020 and AFP 2025. Again, my name is Eric De La Fuente, and we look forward to continuing the conversation as we hopefully shape the future of intelligent treasury together. Thanks so much.
Eric, thanks for the time. Thank you, everyone, for joining.